Welcome. Today we're beginning a rigorous examination into the uh, the foundational history of one of the world's great sports powerhouses, Adidas.
It's a fascinating story.
It really is, and it's a story that's centered entirely on the life and the relentless drive of its founder, Adolf "Adi" Dassler.
An inventor, a cobbler, a businessman.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And his journey was tragically, you could say, inseparable from the rise of Nazi Germany and a family conflict so severe it literally spawned a corporate empire and its fiercest rival.
It's a history that often gets simplified, doesn't it? But the nuances are what really matter here.
I agree.
We aren't just tracing the origins of a shoe brand. We're witnessing how intense personal conflict, ambition, and geopolitical necessity can converge to drive this monumental global enterprise.
And Adi Dassler himself, who lived from 1900 to 1978, he was a pragmatic man. He was focused entirely on performance.
Completely. And by the time of his death, the enterprise he built, Adidas, was just staggering in its scale. We're talking about 17 factories globally, generating annual sales that had surpassed 1 billion Deutschmarks.
That scale is almost impossible to reconcile with the company's humble and frankly precarious beginnings. So our mission today is to thoroughly chart Adi Dassler's path.
Right.
We're going from post-World War I Germany, where just surviving day-to-day was a challenge, through the moral and strategic complexities of the Nazi era, the utter destruction caused by the family feud, and then finally to global dominance, driven by one of the greatest technological upsets in sporting history.
And we really have to emphasize this point. This is fundamentally the saga of two brothers, Adi and Rudolf Dassler.
Yes, the two brothers.
They started together, but their animosity became so corrosive, so profound, that the only path forward for both of them was separation.
A complete split.
And that separation resulted in the birth of Adidas, and directly across the river in their hometown, its eternal competitor, Puma. Global success truly emerged from the harsh, fractured realities of their rivalry and the post-war landscape.
So let's unpack that initial stage, because it requires really setting the scene in the early 1920s. Germany was just reeling from its defeat in the Great War.
The economy was shattered. Hyperinflation was rampant. And starting any business, let alone one that relied on raw materials for manufacturing, was an act of extreme ingenuity.
And that's where Adi started, simply repairing shoes to make ends meet in his mother's washroom.
The word ingenuity is precisely right, particularly when we talk about material shortages. The sources paint a very vivid picture of scavenging.
Scavenging is the perfect word.
Adi had zero reliable supply chain for leather and absolutely no access to credit to buy any kind of factory equipment. So he became a master recycler of war remnants.
It's truly incredible to think about the level of resourcefulness needed. You're talking about using discarded army helmets and bread pouches, actual items from the German war machine, to supply the small, tough pieces of leather required for shoe soles.
Things no one else wanted.
Exactly. And for soft material, like the silk needed for early slippers, he was using material sourced from discarded parachutes. It was literally a factory built from the refuse of a recent war.
And that desperation, it fueled his early attempts at mechanization. He couldn't afford electricity or any dedicated machinery. The sources describe this fascinating, almost Rube Goldberg-esque rigged system he developed.
That's amazing.
He needed to power a leather milling machine, so he connected it via belts to a mounted stationary bicycle.
I just can't get over that image. His first official employee literally had to use pedal power to run the production line. You could almost visualize the relentless, exhausting labor necessary just to process the leather needed for a handful of shoes.
It really underscores how every single product they made in those early days was a triumph of willpower over economic reality.
But despite those limitations, what distinguished Adi was his focus. He wasn't just a repair man, was he? He was a visionary cobbler.
That's the key. His core belief was that athletic performance demanded specialized footwear. Most people at the time just wore modified street shoes for sport.
Yep.
Adi, on the other hand, constantly experimented with materials. Not just leather scraps, but exotic, strong, and lightweight options like shark skin and kangaroo leather, all in the pursuit of better strength-to-weight ratios.
He treated shoemaking like a science project, not just a trade. That's why his widow, Kate Dassler, later captured his obsession so perfectly. She said, developing shoes was his hobby, not his job. He did it very scientifically.
He was operating like an engineer in a cramped workshop, obsessed with friction, weight distribution, stability, all of it.
And it was this potential that convinced his older brother, Rudolf Dassler, to abandon his initial aspiration of becoming a policeman.
Right. Rudolf was focused more on the sales and administration side of things. He joins the firm on July 1st, 1923.
And this formal partnership leads to the official registration of the company 1 year later in July 1924. The Gebruder Dassler, Sportschuhfabrik, Herzogenaurach.
The Dassler brothers' sports shoe factory.
And the innovation started almost immediately. By 1925, they were already moving beyond just simple slippers. They were producing Fußballschuhe.
Robust football boots, yeah, with nailed-in studs. And also specialized track shoes with hand-forged spikes, often crafted by a local smithy, a man named Fritz Slein.
These were revolutionary for the time.
They really were. And this brings us to the first of two crucial factors that move the company beyond just being a successful regional factory.
Which was?
The strategic relationship they forged with a man named Joseph Weitzer. He was a former Olympian who had become the coach of the German Olympic track and field team.
Weitzer was transformative for them. He was intrigued enough by Adi's designs to travel all the way from Munich to their tiny factory in Herzogenaurach.
And their bond was apparently immediate. It was built on a mutual, almost obsessive desire to improve performance. This friendship gave Adi something invaluable: access.
Access to the elite.
Exactly. Access to German and foreign elite athletes who would be competing on the grandest stage of all, the 1936 Berlin Olympics.
And we can see this access paying dividends years before 1936, can't we? Dassler footwear was already on the feet of champions at the 1928 Amsterdam Games.
Yes. Notably worn by Lena Radke, the German gold medal winner in middle distance running. They also supplied German gold medal runners at the 1932 Los Angeles Games. This early success was all about establishing credibility.
Now, connecting this athletic success to the rising political tide, that political environment is the second crucial factor for their growth. It's just impossible to discuss the 1930s in Germany without discussing Nazism, and the Dassler brothers strategically aligned themselves.
Exactly. Adolf Hitler's racial nationalist philosophy placed enormous emphasis on physical prowess and athletic teamwork. Sport was being used as a nationalistic and propaganda tool, especially leading up to the 1936 Games.
And the Dassler brothers understood immediately that state prioritization of athletics meant a guaranteed economic benefit for anyone supplying that industry.
It was a business decision. The sources confirm that in May 1933, just 3 months after Hitler was appointed chancellor, both brothers officially joined the Nazi Party.
And Rudolf was reportedly the more fervent believer, embracing the ideology more fully.
Yes, the sources suggest that. For Adi, however, it seems to have been a far more pragmatic calculation. His ambition was purely technological and commercial. He focused on ensuring the factory remained profitable by supplying the now heavily prioritized youth sports leagues.
He needed to become a supplier, a coach, to various clubs, including those affiliated with the Hitler Youth, which were becoming mandatory and expanding rapidly.
It was simply essential for expanding production and revenue in the mid-1930s.
And while he later testified that he restricted his activities to coaching and avoided political rallies, the political compliance of the era was, well, it was unavoidable.
Completely. Both brothers were also members of the National Socialist Motor Corps, and all the correspondents from the firm universally concluded with the necessary complimentary closing, Heil Hitler. It was the price of doing business and just surviving in an environment where the state controlled nearly all industry and resources.
It's hard to imagine that level of intense invention and commercial progress continuing, especially as the shadow of war began to fall. But that darkness only intensified the family's existing strife, leading to a decade where personal life and geopolitical conflict completely destroyed the partnership.
And the catalyst for this emotional war seems to have been Adi's marriage to Kate Martz in 1934.
Tell us about that.
Well, the sources are very specific here. The entire Dassler clan, Adi, Rudolf, their wives, parents, and 5 grandchildren, they all live together in the same cramped family villa in Herzogenaurach.
That sounds tense.
Very. And when Catherine entered the picture, she was immediately seen as a disruptive force within this tight-knit, tradition-bound Franconian family.
She was assertive, outspoken, and deeply suspicious of the established ways of the Dassler family. This led to immediate bitter tensions, not just with Rudolf and his wife Friedel, but also with the Dassler parents.
Rudolf later really solidified this viewpoint, squarely blaming the entire rift on Kate. He claimed their relationship had been ideal until 1933, and the deterioration started because Kate, quote, tried to interfere in business matters.
It seems less likely Keitha caused the feud, and more likely she just refused to conform to the subservient role expected of women within that rigid family structure, which made her a convenient target for Rudolph's mounting frustrations.
I think that's a fair assessment. The deeper issue was the clash of egos between the brothers. Adi focused on product innovation, and Rudolf focused on sales dominance.
But for a moment, all the family squabbles were eclipsed by the firm's grandest triumph, the 1936 Berlin Olympics. This was Adi's moment to prove his scientific approach to footwear was globally viable.
This is the legendary moment that cemented their international fame. Adi, using his connections, somehow found his way to Jesse Owens, the American track and field star.
An incredible move given the intense racial nationalist agenda of the Games.
It was an act of incredible foresight and perhaps even audacity. The sources suggest the transaction was wordless. Adi just offered the shoes described as having 2 leather strips for lateral support and dark spikes, and Owens accepted.
The sheer risk of outfitting a black American athlete, who was the direct antithesis of the regime's propaganda at a Nazi-hosted event, that cannot be overstated.
The risk, of course, turned into a monumental reward. Owens wore the Dassler footwear during his historic sweep, securing 4 gold medals. The images of Owens winning were seen globally.
And that instantly catapulted the Dassler name, and more importantly, the idea that German technology could aid athletic performance onto the international stage.
But the moment the war began, the ability to profit from sports enthusiasm ended abruptly. Adi was conscripted into the Wehrmacht in August 1940.
But was quickly relieved of duty in February 1941 to run the factory, which the regime deemed essential enough to partially convert to military material production.
This conversion was necessary for survival. But as the war escalated, the factory's ability to function normally just cratered. Worker shortages became acute, leading to one of the morally gray areas of the firm's history.
Yes. By October 1942, Adi formally requested the utilization of 5 Soviet prisoners of war to staff his production line.
Then came the final brutal transformation in 1943 as the Reich initiated the Totaler Krieg, or Total War campaign, demanding maximum industrial output for military purposes.
To protect the factory from Allied air raids, by disguising its true function, the shoemaking equipment was replaced entirely by spot welding machines.
The Dassler factory was now producing Panzerschrecks. These were shoulder-fired anti-tank rocket launchers, a critical weapon for the German infantry late in the war.
The complexity involved in shifting from making specialized leather footwear to manufacturing precision anti-tank weaponry. It's hard to even comprehend. It confirms the factory was fully integrated into the Reich's military machine.
And this is where the personal drama became truly devastating. Rudolf was absolutely enraged that Adi had been released from the Wehrmacht to manage the factory, while he, Rudolf, was forced to serve again, despite being the older brother.
He viewed this as a personal slight, didn't he? Conciliated by his brother's political maneuvering.
And we must pause here, as the sources reveal a profound tragedy tied directly to Rudolf's growing bitterness and authority. Rudolf used his managerial position to deny employment to his own sister Marie's 2 sons.
That decision was lethal. During the height of the war, if young men were not employed in an industry deemed essential to the war effort, they were guaranteed to be drafted.
The manpower requirements were just escalating. Marie's sons were conscripted shortly thereafter, and heartbreakingly, they never returned from the war.
It's a terrible story.
And Marie never forgave Rudolf for this act. It wasn't just corporate maneuvering. It was an act of profound spite that had fatal, lasting consequences for the family. It highlights how the personal rivalry took precedence over even basic familial bonds.
The conflict reached its boiling point in January 1943. Rudolf, called up again, was serving in Poland. His intense anger led him to believe his conscription was directly engineered by Adi and his local Nazi Party contacts.
His letters from the front were terrifying. Rudolf wrote directly to Adi, threatening the entire enterprise. He wrote, "I will not hesitate to seek the closure of the factory so that you be forced to take up an occupation, to carry a gun."
He was willing to destroy the business they had built together just to drag his brother back into the fighting.
And Rudolf eventually acted on that bitterness. 6 months later, when the factory was converted entirely to Panzerschreck production, Rudolf returned on leave. He discovered Adi had already completed the inventory of remaining leather supplies.
This felt like the final power play to him.
And in a vengeful outburst, Rudolf denounced his own brother to the Kreisleitung. This wasn't a casual complaint. The Kreisleitung were the powerful county-level party leaders who controlled everything locally.
Denouncing someone to them, especially for potentially mismanaging vital war materials, could lead to immediate political investigation, arrest, maybe even execution.
Case later described how, following this denunciation, Adion was treated in the most demeaning manner by local party officials. The level of familial hatred had just become existential.
And as the war reached its conclusion, Rudolf fled his unit in Poland in January 1945, securing a medical certificate claiming military incapacity due to a frozen foot.
But history wasn't done with him yet. The day after their father, Christoph Dassler's funeral on April 4th, 1945, Rudolf was arrested by the Gestapo in Nuremberg.
He was imprisoned, likely for desertion or unauthorized leave, and remained incarcerated until the Allied liberation in early May.
Meanwhile, back in Herzegovina, American troops were advancing. They paused right outside the Dassler factory, which they identified as a potential military target because of the Panzerschreck production.
And it was Keith, showing incredible bravery, who successfully approached the troops. She argued passionately that the plant's true purpose was simply the production of sports shoes, a civilian enterprise.
Her quick thinking saved the factory from certain destruction.
And this act of saving the factory immediately paid dividends. The American GIs, in need of sports equipment, placed massive orders for basketball, baseball, and hockey footwear. The sources rightly call this the first boost on the road to becoming a worldwide success story.
But before they could rebuild, they had to confront their past.
Yes, the war was over, but the fight between the brothers entered its final legal phase. The complex process of denazification mandated by the Allied occupation authorities. This process was the final hammer blow that formalized the end of their partnership.
And Rudolf faced the most immediate consequences. In July 1945, he was arrested by American authorities on suspicion of having worked for the Sicherheitsdienst, the SD, the intelligence and secret service of the SS. He was sent to an internment camp.
His defense during the interrogations was, well, it was fraught with contradictions. He claimed he'd been sentenced to the Chow, but escaped and was only reporting daily to the Gestapo while they investigated him. He denied any voluntary assistance to the Reich.
The American investigator, however, was highly suspicious. They noted critically that both Rudolf's wife, Friedel, and his brother, Adi, offered testimony that Rudolf had, in fact, worked for the Gestapo.
Which was incredibly damaging testimony, whether it was entirely accurate or, driven by bitterness.
Right. Rudolf was eventually released in July 1946, not because he was cleared, but because Allied authorities were shifting focus toward releasing prisoners who weren't deemed imminent security threats.
Before Rudolph's release, Adi faced his own denazification panel, and the initial verdict in July 1946 was severe. He was declared a belasteter, literally a burdened person.
This was the second most serious category, reserved for major offenders, activists, militarists, and profiteers. The sentence could include up to 10 years in prison and, most importantly, immediate removal from management.
For a man whose entire identity was tied to his factory, this was devastating. Adi fought this classification tooth and nail. He submitted a massive body of evidence for his appeal, demonstrating his limited political role.
He had to prove his character went against the ideology he had formerly joined. His defense included testimony from the mayor of Herzegovina, who was trusted by the Allies.
And crucially, a nearby half-Jewish mayor testified that Adi had warned him of a potential Gestapo arrest and provided him with a safe hiding place on his property.
A longtime Communist Party member also testified that Adi's primary focus was always production and that he was never involved in political activities.
Furthermore, Adi provided clear financial documentation showing the factory did not profit from the forced military production, that it actually lost 100,000 marks on the Panzerschreck manufacturing.
This was vital in refuting that profiteer label.
But the committee didn't clear him instantly. They first reduced his status to minder belasteter, or lesser offender, which still meant a period of probation and restrictions on his business activities.
And this is where Rudolf, now free from internment, saw his final opportunity to wrestle control. During Adi's appeal proceedings, Rudolf inserted malicious statements claiming Adi organized weapons production purely for profit, falsely denounced him, and used his position to give political speeches to the employees.
He was leveraging the formal legal process of the occupation authority to try and ruin his brother's life and career. It's just astonishing.
It is. Keith, however, provided a strong denial of Rudolf's claims, and the weight of Adi's character witnesses ultimately prevailed.
So in November 1946, Adi's status was finally reduced to Mitläufer, or follower.
The least serious category, yes, generally applied to those who simply went along with the regime without active involvement or malicious intent. It relieved him of most civil disabilities, and he formally resumed management of the factory in February 1947.
But Rudolph's actions during that appeal, The sheer betrayal of using the denazification process to seek his brother's imprisonment, that made any further collaboration impossible. This was the point of no return.
The division of assets was inevitable, and it permanently cleaved the entire family. Sister Marie, who had never recovered from the loss of her sons, sided firmly with Adi and Katha. Their mother, Paulina, tragically sided with Rudolf.
The split was executed so meticulously, Adi retained the original primary factory and the family villa. Rudolf took the second factory, situated conveniently across the Arak River, ensuring maximum physical separation.
And the sources confirm the brothers never spoke another word to each other after the division.
Even the employees had to choose loyalties.
They did. Rudolf focused on sales, managed to secure most of the administrative and sales staff. Adi, who was obsessive about design, production, and innovation, retained nearly two-thirds of the employees, primarily the technicians and skilled workers who understood his manufacturing processes.
Then came the formal birth of the corporate giants. Rudolf needed a name. He initially considered Ruda, but ultimately settled on the punchier, more recognizable name, Puma.
Adi's naming process was slightly more complicated. He wanted a contraction of his name, Adi Dassler, landing on Adis. However, that name was rejected as it was already in use by a children's shoe manufacturer.
So, to preserve the contraction, he added a handwritten I between the two parts, finalizing the name in August 1949. Adolf Dassler, Adidas Shoe Fabric.
He also needed a distinctive visual identity, a trademark that could instantly identify his shoes, especially during competition. This is where the iconic three stripes originate.
He realized the straps used for lateral reinforcement on his shoes needed to be colored distinctly. After experimenting with various patterns and counts, he settled on 3 parallel stripes.
And those 3 stripes were officially registered as the company's trademark in March 1949. The legal and physical separation was complete, and the stage was set for the fiercest rivalry in sports history.
With Adidas formally established and the feud now confined to competing across a small river, the focus pivoted back entirely to innovation and performance technology. The moment that took the brand from a successful German enterprise to a global household name arrived just 5 years later at the 1954 World Cup.
This success story involves another figure who had navigated the moral complexities of the Nazi era. Sepp Herberger, the renowned coach of the German national football team.
Like the Dassler brothers, Herberger was a former Nazi party member who had been classified as a Mitläufer post-war.
And Herberger was initially courted and actually won over by Rudolf and Puma after the split.
But the perpetual family feud intervened yet again. Rudolf, known for his temper and his sharp tongue, reportedly insulted Herberger, potentially over payment or marketing disputes for the team to wear Puma gear.
That insult cost Rudolf dearly. Herberger immediately switched his allegiance to Adi and Adidas. And in retrospect, Adi was the better partner for a coach focused on technical performance anyway.
Why do you say that?
Well, Adi was quiet, observational, and constantly asking players about their needs. He wasn't just a supplier, he was an embedded engineer.
He became a fixture in the national team's entourage. He would sit right beside Herberger during matches, ready to make adjustments or repairs, and he developed a particularly close relationship with the team's star, Fritz Walter.
So let's set the stage for the 1954 World Cup in Switzerland. West Germany, a freshly established post-war nation, was desperate for something to boost national morale.
They fought their way to the final, but they faced the seemingly invincible Hungarian Golden Team, arguably the greatest football team in the world at the time.
A team who had recently humiliated the Germans 8-3 in group play.
The atmosphere was one of quiet dread. German fans weren't expecting a win. They were merely hoping the team would avoid another humiliating defeat. The odds were astronomical.
Then came the day of the final. The weather intervened dramatically. Rain began to fall heavily, creating a muddy, heavy, sloppy pitch condition at the Wankdorf Stadium.
The German team dubbed this perfect sludge Fritz Walter Vetter, as their star player excelled in those conditions.
But the real star of the day wasn't the player, it was the hidden technology of his shoes. Adi Dassler's innovation screw-in studs became the decisive, secret weapon that afternoon.
You have to understand the genius here. Traditional football boots used fixed leather spike studs. If the field got muddy, those fixed studs quickly became useless, caked in mud, and offered no traction.
The boots just grew heavier and heavier as they absorbed water and collected sludge.
Adi's design was revolutionary. It incorporated studs of varying lengths that could be quickly affixed and removed using a simple wrench, depending on the pitch conditions. It was the first instance of custom-engineered footwear for variable environments in sport.
As the field drastically deteriorated due to the rain, Herberger issued the now legendary command, Adi, screw them on. The longer, customized spikes were added to the Adidas boots.
And this provided the German players with dramatically superior traction and stability, allowing them to move quickly and decisively across the muddy pitch.
Meanwhile, the Hungarian team, in their traditional fixed stud boots, were slipping, sliding, and carrying the weight of mud-caked leather. Their physical superiority was neutralized by the technical innovation of a cobbler.
The result was the miracle of Bern. West Germany staged a massive 3-2 upset victory, securing the World Cup. It was one of the most stunning underdog victories in sporting history.
And Herberger immediately and publicly acknowledged Dassler, praising his technical contribution as essential to the victory.
The impact was multi-layered and profound. Locally in West Germany, the victory was about much more than football. It was a crucial post-war moment that restored national self-esteem and pride, proving that the new Germany could succeed on the world stage.
And globally, the impact was commercial gold. The 1954 final was the first World Cup final ever to be televised, introducing millions of viewers around the world not just to the upset, but to the sight of the winning team wearing the specific footwear that facilitated that victory.
Adidas's fame became instant and global overnight, legitimizing Adi's scientific approach to athletic performance.
And Adi continued innovating relentlessly until his death in 1978. While the 1954 World Cup was the initial springboard, the decades that followed were marked by this relentless competition with Puma, which pushed both companies to invent further and establish global distribution networks.
The rivalry was total, wasn't it? It even extended to personal contracts with athletes, often forbidding them from associating with the rival brand.
Oh, completely. Adi and his son, Horst Dassler, who later founded the arena swimming equipment brand, built Adidas into a multinational powerhouse, constantly acquiring intellectual property and dominating major sporting events, all while Rudolf and Puma shadowed their every move.
Adi died of heart failure in 1978, leaving the company in the hands of Keith and Horst. It remained a family enterprise, managing global growth and surviving the intense competitive pressure from Puma until Horst's untimely death in 1987.
The company remained family-owned until its IPO in 1995, marking a formal end to the tight-knit, although often dysfunctional, family control that had defined its history for decades. The Dassler family's direct involvement in the management of Adidas finally ended in 2018.
If we look at this entire trajectory, from scavenging leather, from WWI helmets, to equipping World Cup champions with customized technology, the story of Adi Dassler really reminds us that even the most innovative global brands are products of intense, messy, and often tragic historical forces.
That's the powerful perspective we want to leave you with today. This global sports enterprise, built on technological superiority and the unwavering focus on athletic performance, emerged directly from the rubble of post-war Germany and a bitter family rivalry that was so consuming separation was the only viable path to corporate survival for both brothers.
The tragedy of the family fracture and the subsequent need for commercial one-upmanship fueled decades of innovation. It's a stunning example of how conflict, when contained to the competitive sphere, can spur unprecedented success.
It really is.
Thank you for joining us for this thorough examination of the source material.
What's fascinating here is thinking about the sheer technical leap required for the screw-in studs to work. It wasn't just a gimmick, it was a carefully managed secret weapon that capitalized on predictable variables like weather and terrain. It proves that invention, even in the most basic industries, is often the ultimate strategic advantage.
Thanks for listening.